Oh, hi.
Hello, is this Brian Kilber?
No, it's not. It's someone who has a very similar name, but not quite that.
Yeah, sorry about that. That was one of those just typing fast and typed it fast and wrong once, and then decided to propagate that over every single medium I
Yeah,
could find.
when you actually if you have your Twitch linked to Twitter and stuff, you mess something up in your title and you go live and it's like, oh no, now it's broadcast everywhere.
But on the plus side, I did it. I was able to type that at like 80 words a minute, just poorly. So I like to say I would be the worst assistant ever. I would type really fast, but it would all be wrong.
Yeah, I am a very fast and usually pretty accurate typist, but and when I'm streaming, I get people complaining about my keyboard anytime I'm typing because I have a mechanical keyboard, which I'm sure you probably just heard in the background right there. But
Yeah, I did. At least it wasn't as loud. Like Jake, I think he puts his microphone on his mechanical keyboard. It kind of sounds like tiny bombs are dropping every time. So yours actually wasn't as bad, at least. So how you doing today?
doing well, doing well. I was just chatting a bit with my. I actually don't know if people actually know this, but my brother actually now works with Stoneblade as well. He came out a couple months ago to take over sort of organizing our operations team. So he we were just having some sushi for lunch. So
Would you call that nepotism, or is he qualified?
well, he's actually exceptionally qualified. He was previously the director of new process management at a major health insurance billing company, and games sounded more fun than that, so he came out and worked with us.
Okay, that's cool. It does sound like a bit of a pay cut. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, yes, yes, it is.
That's all right. So good for him. Well, because it's all because he wanted to hang out with his brother, right?
It's certainly part of it. And we both grew up in New England, and he was living in South Boston, and now lives 2 blocks from the beach. So I'm sure that might be part of it.
Oh yeah, that helps. That definitely helps. So I was thinking I would ask you a couple questions. Maybe we could build some decks, play some games against some people. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So here's the first question I have for you.
All right.
So a lot of people in SoulForge know your weekly streams. What the heck happened to your amazing weekly stream?
Well, so we used to do the weekly stream, and that was pretty much till the end of last year when we launched the new website, and started doing the weekly articles and stuff on the website. And a lot of it was really when we were doing the weekly stream. A lot of what people expected from it was a QA type session, and we ended up getting very similar questions all the time of when is this coming, when is this coming, when is this coming, and it wasn't really something that we necessarily had new answers to each week.
Right.
So basically, we decided that it was a much easier way and much more effective way to release information in when it was ready and in a controlled fashion to actually have sort of more regular updates being done via the website rather than having the weekly stream. I have been streaming myself pretty regularly these days and have been playing a bit of SoulForge now and then on that stream as well. But it's possible that we'll see a return of the weekly stream in some capacity. And if we do, it'll be much more of a come play SoulForge with Kibler rather than a sort of QA type thing, because I think in that sense it wasn't very effective. But I do think that having an opportunity to hang out with people and play is much better.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what I was going to suggest, because I agree. By the end, the stream was kind of unwatchable, not by your own fault, but just by literally the same questions every single
The chat was
week.
always, when is this coming? When is this coming? When is this coming? And I certainly respect the fact that people are interested in that information. But I mean, frankly, we just got so many questions that weren't things that we could answer at the time.
Yeah.
And didn't have any new information since the last time that we answered them. And that basically was just you would have the people who watch the stream regularly who they knew the sort of status of these things, but anyone new coming in would always be asking these sort of things, and it got sort of difficult to manage that. So I do think that if the stream returns, it'll be in a much more sort of play focused way.
Yeah, I would love to see a stream that was like, come beat Brian Kibler. If you beat him, you get a code. And then it was just like, it was just a challenge session where you just took on people.
That's not a bad idea. I could see. I mean, I don't know if we necessarily do that weekly. Maybe we would, but you could definitely do something like that from time to time at least.
Yeah, I think what you should do though is like rotate. So you're on it most of the time, and then every now and then you like throw David to the wolves, and you're like, go lose a lot of games, David.
Oh, I mean, we could have my brother play, and then everyone would get codes. We give him a lot of crap for basically never winning in the office. And we do lots of internal play tests and stuff of new draft formats, new constructed and everything. And yesterday he actually had one of the best draft decks I've ever seen, and he was thrilled to go 2-2.
Oh my! Interesting. I have a question for you that I don't know if you're gonna like this question, but I've always wondered this question.
Okay.
So here's the question: you have extensive experience designing major games for sort of major companies. Mm-hmm. Why did you even choose to come work for a smallish company like Stoneblade for a game like Soulforge? Like, it seems like a fairly large risk on your part. Did Justin Gary like drive up to your house with like a dump truck full of cash and like unload it on your doorstep? Like, all the Kickstarter money is now in an account that's yours. Like, how did this work out?
I mean, I've known Justin for a really long time. Justin and I have been friends going back to when we played together on the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour. I've known Justin since we were both like 15, and I'm 33 now. So, and we worked together at Upper Deck, working on the Versus system card game as well as a few other projects. And then both of us ended up leaving Upper Deck, but stayed in touch. We were still good friends, and I had been basically working for a number of companies doing their stuff, and the idea of working with a group of friends of mine and working on things that we had total control over is extremely appealing. There's something to be said for working on something like the World of Warcraft trading card game that I was the head developer for, and that being something that's huge and is you see people playing it all over, and is was at least initially a really big success. But at the same time, you only have so much creative control over that, because not only is it something that's being made by a huge company that I'm only a small part of, as it was when I was at Upper Deck, and it is also a major license of another major company that you have to listen to what they say, or else things just don't get made. So the idea of making our own games with a small group of friends and having total control over them was just really, really appealing.
Okay, I can see that. And I mean, I know what your answer is going to be, but are you happy with the choice that you've made?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I definitely enjoy, like I said, having the freedom to control the direction of things, as well as, I mean, just the freedom of working in an environment that is a bunch of friends of mine and is not really like a part of a big corporation. Like the environment at Stoneblade is very different than the environment at a lot of other companies. Everyone here are friends. We all hang out both at the office while we work and after work on the weekends and things like that. And it's really more than just a company. It's like a community. It's a group of friends. So I think that adds a lot to the experience.
All right, I'm sold. I'm ready to give up my position as a professor. When can I come work for you guys? I'll be the janitor. So let's see. We had a mechanic spoiled for us yesterday. I'm curious, are there any mechanics that you are really looking forward to from set 3?
Mechanics that I know that Justin talked about consistent yesterday.
Yeah, I'm really excited about consistent.
Consistent is a pretty cool mechanic, and I was answering some questions about it on Reddit earlier today, because there's a little bit of confusion about how it works. But people were asking, how is it that you guarantee that you draw the card? But basically, exactly what consistent is that a card with consistent guarantees that it is in the top 20 cards of your deck anytime your deck is shuffled. So, there are people like, what if you have, a Shardplate Mutant was one of the questions. And it was like, well, you can draw it. It'll be in your top 20 cards, but there's nothing to prevent it from being discarded by Shardplate.
Right.
So, buyer beware. But I definitely think that's a mechanic that is really interesting. And, I know that one of the sort of hot button topics in the community, particularly among sort of competitive players is the level of randomness or variance in SoulForge, and I think that consistent is a mechanic that can definitely appeal to the sort of player who is looking to mitigate that, who's looking to ensure that okay, well I put my investment into leveling this card, and I want to get paid off for it. And
Right.
with consistent, you are guaranteed to draw that card, assuming you live that long.
Yeah, my favorite part about that mechanic is that I feel like it allows you guys to make cards that are greedy that would currently be unplayable in most constructed metagames, where it would just be too greedy of a card because, like you said, you couldn't reliably draw it anyway, and so you're just investing too much into it. Having a mechanic like that allows you guys a lot of design space to really do something interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like a card, for instance, like a card like Krogius. Krogius is like one of my favorite cards in SoulForge. I think that the story that it tells is really, really exciting. I think that it really highlights the leveling mechanic and how it not only shows this story of what's going on, but also shows the opportunity cost to payoff that can come from leveling. That there isn't actually a resource system in SoulForge, but there is a cost to leveling cards in a certain fashion. And if for instance there were a card like Krogius that had consistent at level 3, that would be a pretty exciting card, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would try my best to find a way to put that in a deck. If you just slap consistent on Krogius, I think Krogius goes from a card that was not played and now is a bit in the Lotus deck to a card that people actually build decks around. So I think it's a very exciting mechanic. Actually, I'm really looking forward to that.
It's really cool, and I mean that's one of the things. It was actually one of the very first mechanics that we talked to our programmers about making when we really were working on even set 1. It was something that we had thought about and talked about. It was one of the first test mechanics that we had our rules engine programmer actually put together because it's the sort of thing that you can do in a digital game that you can't really do in a physical game. It's this cool thing. It's like, okay, yes, the game is random, but not entirely. What the cards that you draw can be controlled in this fashion, and we've seen a number of suggestions from people in the forums that are various ways, various algorithms to alter the nature of drawing cards, but our general preference is that we can make ways that for people who do want to address it in a card pool perspective.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot better. I'm always hesitant anytime anyone suggests an algorithm shuffler change. It just feels like there's so many cards that you guys haven't tested for that could be manipulated to some degree, and I would much rather have an option like a deck that's like Gox, consistent cards, the new Metamind. Like, if you really want to get to see these cards, well then, here is an option to build a deck that will allow you to do that. I would much prefer that.
I apologize for the loud typing. I'm telling people that I'm on your stream.
No problem. So essentially, I agree with that. Could you? I'm not going to ask you to spoil a card that has consistent, but could you give us just an idea of the type of stats we might see on a card with consistent?
I mean, generally speaking, you'll pay some cost for at least in the early levels to have a consistent card. At least at the higher levels. So I've seen a number of people questioning, well, what if you have 20 cards with consistent, or 21 cards with consistent? What happens? Generally speaking, the cards with consistent are consistent at their higher levels or even at just level 3, rather than there's not like cards that are just level 1 consistent, so you just always draw those. It's once most of the mechanic is built around trying getting to be able to draw the higher level versions of those cards, and for that. You end up paying a little bit of a cost at level 1. We have both consistent creatures and consistent spells, and most of them are a little bit weaker than you would anticipate at level 1, and then generally reasonably solid creatures at the higher levels.
Yeah, that's what I would anticipate. Like, I was thinking something like maybe let's just throw out some stats, like a 4/4 into maybe like an 8/8 into like an 18/18, something along those lines.
I should pull up set 3 on my dev server on SoulForge right now and look for them.
All right. So real quick, the timer went down. Thankfully, no push-ups are needed, so I'm resetting. All right.
What is? I don't know what this push-up challenge is or whatever. But...
Yeah, there's a push-up timer on the bottom.
Okay.
So what I decided is I'm old, frail, and out of shape, and if people want to see me die on stream, they can donate a little money, and I'll have to do push-ups. So there we go.
All right.
Thankfully, people are not really taking me up on it. Otherwise, it would be an ugly sight. So, all right, let's see. What's your favorite card that has come out so far for SoulForge?
My favorite card.
And
so
why?
far?
I mean, it doesn't have to be a good card. It can just be a card that
Sure.
you really like the design of, you think is an elegantly designed card.
I think one of my favorite cards is probably Stormbringer. Stormbringer was Wild Wind Spirit in initially that was the playtest name of it, and I think one of the reasons it's my favorite card is because initially the card was actually pretty boring, and it was named Wild Wind Spirit, and it just I think it had like mobility, and it had the damage trigger, and I was just like, well, we might as well make it more wild and have it randomly fly around the board and shoot things. And I think that the moments of excitement that Stormbringer generates because of oh, I really need to go here, or oh, please don't go there, are just really, really cool. And I think that the card is at a power level that I think is reasonable, so that it's not like the sort of card that if it like randomly gets you, it's just like super frustrating because it's not overall an incredibly powerful card, but it's a high enough power level that people do feel like they want to play with it, so you get these cool, exciting moments happening even in competitive games.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Stormbringer, any card that's not an auto include in every deck, but is always sort of in consideration, I feel like is a pretty elegantly designed card. And Stormbringer is really fun in how it jumps around. You never really know, where it's going to end up, and you can kind of control it, right? So like you can set up a board state where you play your guys in a way to make it jump into a certain lane. You can make it into a 50-50 shot, and then you pray to the SoulForge gods. So I agree. It can be a really fun card. Can you give me an example of a card that was really amazing when you guys designed it, and then you just said, you know what, this card is way too good, and we're going to have to scale it back? Because I know that must happen, right? Like you must come up with these awesome ideas, and then you're just like, no way, that would ruin the game.
I mean, for people who remember way back before the initial release, when we just had the 2 decks on iPad, I think the original version of Call the Week was just kill a guy at each level, just kill level 1, kill level 2, kill level 3, and it wasn't necessarily that this is a card that breaks the game in a way that's particularly troublesome or like is going to be ruinous, but it was basically just a really boring, uninteresting card because you always want to play it, and there were basically no reason not to, and you always could because there's always a guy. So
right.
you'd always want to play it at level 1, even if there wasn't a particularly good target, because you wanted to have it at level 2 because it was just so efficient at trading with whatever it is that your opponent did, and that had the impact of making no one ever want to play cards like Enrage or anything that pumped guys because it's just so easy to kill anything.
Right, I agree. Speaking of that card, Spell Shield. Is this something that you guys have thought about? Because I've thought about it. I remember it was on like an original Krogius, and it just seems like such a dangerous trait to put on a card because it would be so hard to balance that card. It seems like it would have to be such a bad card because once you start putting Enrages on it and Regenerate on it, suddenly it just wins the game outright.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways to do it. I mean, we've talked about a variety of ways to protect creatures from spells, basically, because if you're playing a deck that's like making a big guy, it can suck to just have your guy killed. Yep. But yeah, there's definitely a danger of you make a big guy that there isn't any really good way to remove because either it has some sort of protection from spells or there aren't any good removal spells that actually target it. Like I know that a lot of people are frustrated by Night Gaunt in draft, for instance, because Night Gaunt is a card that when you're playing in draft, it's very difficult to find particularly efficient ways to remove it, and it can get out of hand pretty quickly. And we are definitely very very cognizant of not necessarily cards that can be too powerful in that sort of situation. I mean, obviously we don't want to avoid anything being too powerful, but what is more of a problem is really cards that feel oppressive, and that's the problem with Night Gaunt, is that the experience of losing to Night Gaunt feels hopeless and goes on for a long time. Seriously though, we are generally pretty careful when it comes to mechanics like regenerate and mechanics like armor, because those are the sort of things that can allow you to make a virtually unstoppable creature that isn't necessarily going to even end the game very quickly. Right. And it is more, it's more troublesome from a game design perspective when a game is basically decided and one player, it more or less can't win, but it just drags on forever. Because you're just dragging out the pain for that person. Right.
It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Right. Like a really powerful card that ends the game in fairly short order, as long as there's ways to counter it, is much preferable to a card that, takes a long time to actually win the game, and is difficult to stop.
Yeah, I can understand that. One more question before we start building some decks.
Sure.
I'm interested in card design myself, so I'm curious. Do you generally, when you're designing cards, do you start with like a cool ability that you come up with? Do you start with a stat base of like, well, we need to have X amount of cards with this kind of stats, or is it some of each depending on the card?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways. I mean, a lot of times you're making cards because you have a cool idea, and it's like we want to make, like one of the coolest cards in Soulforge is Everflame Phoenix, and we basically were like, let's make a Phoenix. And, designed everything from there. We took the various sort of mythological elements of a phoenix. It's this fiery bird that when it dies turns to ash and then is reborn as a phoenix. And, basically just told that story with the leveling process. And, on the other hand, there's like, okay, well, we want to make a card that is good against, say, Zemus, or good against, token type strategies. And then we make a card like Orion Justicar. It's like, okay, well, we want to make a card that is a counter to these sort of strategies, or works in this particular way, or has synergies with these kind of things because that's a sort of deck or play pattern that we're trying to support that we feel like needs a little bit of help. So I mean, there's all sorts of different things, and numbers like creature stats are one of the last things that are actually determined. We'll like put creatures in the card file. And, often, we'll go back and look through it. It's just like, these stats are totally nonsense. Either they're just like, they don't make sense with what the creature is doing, or they're way too high, or they're way too low. Right. And I mean, that's literally the last thing before a file is ready to go, before the set is put live, is the stats. I mean, we tinker with them the entire time. We play the cards a bunch, and the stats are hugely important. But they're about the last thing that is sort of set in stone, because that's a matter of power level, whereas everything else is a matter of like what the sort of card's play pattern and the idea is going to be.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting thought. Someone had an interesting idea in the chat that instead of spell shield, like a one-time spell shield, right? So like I don't know, spell shield 1 or something, or spell shield 2, and so they're immune to one spell.
Yeah, I mean the problem with that is that often ends up being very close to it is like your opponent has to not only have multiple spells that can target it, but the second one has to be able to kill it.
Yeah,
it ends up costing them so much. I mean, it's interesting because in Soulforge there's like, I think that a mechanic like like spell shield, or whatever you want to call it, is less of a sort of big deal, less of a necessity even than in a lot of other games, because so much of the action in Soulforge is driven through creature combat anyway, that it's actually difficult it is not difficult, rather. Messed that up. It is not difficult to mostly deal with creatures through creature combat unless there's something particularly special about the creature that's making it, hard to kill, like regenerate or armor or whatever. And in that case, we generally wouldn't want it to be protected, because those are the sort of things that if if it's hard to kill with creatures and you can't kill it with spells, this is going to be just a really nightmarish card to actually deal with.
Yeah.
So we had, I mean, you saw that initial versions of Krogius had the spell-proof ability, and ultimately we decided that we wanted there to be outs to things. That it's really frustrating if there's just something that you feel totally hopeless once it hits the table. If it is not something like Forge Guardian Omega or whatever, that takes some sort of totally outlandish sequence of plays to actually happen.
Right.
So we felt less and less like we wanted a mechanic like Spell Shield, and that it certainly wasn't particularly necessary for the game to play smoothly.